Next up for today, we have the State of the Valley's Water, and today presenting is Nina Hawk, the Chief Operating Officer of Water Utility Valley Water. And I've been hoping to have Nina Hawk, I think, for 3 years now, and I'm glad to finally have her here. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Water Utility Enterprise for Valley Water. She is responsible for leading Santa Clara County's water supply program, consisting of water importation, surface reservoir operations and storage, groundwater management, raw and treated water delivery, drinking water treatment, water recycling and purification, and water conservation programs. The Water Utility Enterprise encompasses 10 reservoirs, 3 pump stations, 142 miles of pipelines, 4 water treatment plants, and 393 acres of recharge ponds. She has led significant projects throughout her career, including serving as the City of Santa Clara Assistant Director, implementing public utility infrastructure improvements for Levi Stadium, and long-term capital improvement program development and implementation. Nina successfully rebuilt and reestablished 7 critical services divisions within the municipality environment as Public Works Director. She also worked extensively to streamline fiscal and contract management in compliance with state contracting codes. Nina is a published technical writer for both potable and recycled water applications and programs. She is also a lifetime member of Chi Epsilon Honor Society and was a recipient of the Rising Star Award by Municipal Management Association of Northern California. Additionally, Nina holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineering and a Master of Public Administration, both from San Jose State University. And I don't have the second page. But nonetheless, she received the Rising Star Award, and I consider her a rock star in the municipality business. We're lucky to have her in our community, in Valley Water. It was lucky to get her. Please welcome Nina Hawk.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. We're just going to give you a general overview of where we are with water. Obviously we love water here and we can't have plants, can't have beautiful landscaping without it. And we just like to give you an overview. So we'll begin today. Talk a little bit about the hydrological condition in the reservoirs to date. We have on the left-hand side a chart that depicts the hydrology, which we have both in snow water equivalent in northern Sierras, also northern Sierra precipitation, and then rainfall in Santa Clara County. What we're trending at is about 58, 54, and 56% in terms of rainfall to date, which is good. Obviously, you guys know we've had a dry month this month, so we're waiting to see if we have additional rains next month and into the spring. The next chart is also equally important to us because it talks about the reservoirs throughout the state of California. Shasta, which is owned and operated by the federal government, is sitting at 77%, Oroville 63%, which is the state, and San Luis is 75%, which is co-operated by both state and federal. Why are the state and federal reservoirs so important to us? It's because we are the only water agency in the state of California that has both federal and state water. So it's good for us to not only trend these, but we have the diversification of other water that we bring in from both the state and federal reservoirs. And then of course our reservoirs are sitting at 67%, all above 50%. So right now we're trending very well in terms of availability for that water to come both in county and also what's currently in our reservoirs to date. Here's an initial outlook on where we are as it relates to water, or at least the drought monitor, how we look at where we're trending coming into this year and into following years. The yellow indicates abnormally dry and white. And you can see most of the state of California is currently in the white and also a little bit in the yellow. Some portions of that hit our county as well. So we do acknowledge that it is a little bit dry for this time of year. However, it's really important to note on that left-hand side, there's a green box that talks about where are we at with our water today. So what does the water look like for the county as a whole? 15% of our water is state water project, and we're currently sitting at a 15% allocation. So the state lets us know how much water is available, and right now they're saying 50% of our total allocation is available. That will trend upward as they go through the spring, because then they'll monitor those reservoirs across the state. Then of course our CDP, which is our federal supply, is sitting at 65%, which means that we're trending high. Because we're an M&I or municipal industrial customer, we do have a higher allocation than ag because of the people component. They want to make sure that there's sufficient water coming in for high populous areas, and we are one of them. And then our semi-tropic storage is located near Bakersfield in Kern County, where we have 350 TAF, which is quite a bit of water stored down there. We have the ability to pull that water in, exchange it, and move it into county as needed when we have water demands or needs for that water. And then we have 360 TAF, or 1,000 acre feet, that's located within our groundwater basins today within the county. That is also really important. We're actually trending very well in terms of the groundwater basins in county. They are adequately full, they are healthy, and they're standing ready for the next drought for potential use in their groundwater pumping by our region. On the right-hand side is our storage contingency planning stages. So we have different stages that we call in times of drought. They range from the red, which is at the bottom, all the way up to the blue. And what the per acre foot indicates, it starts at 150 and goes all the way up to 300, is that is our monitor based on how much water we have in our groundwater basin. So if we're sitting at 360,000 acre feet, which is in the green box, that last line, and you can see our above average is 300,000. So we're well above that. So we are very healthy on the groundwater basin. However, it's very important to note, despite the fact that our groundwater basin is very full, we still want to take as much precautions and preservation as we can from our community in order to ensure that we don't fall too far below that, or when we do have a drought, we're poised and we're ready to conserve that water and use it throughout the county. So right now we actually do have, and I'll take you to the next slide, a call for 20%. Now during the last drought, this was a mandatory call from our board and to our community, and we worked very closely with the cities and retailers for that. But we have a conservation call that's voluntary still in place for 20%. And why is that? Because we believe conservation is a way of life. And it's very important for us to continue to conserve and really have good practices throughout our community. This chart indicates for this past year, 2019, January all the way through December, all the various different sources from North County, South County, treated water, SCVWD, which actually their water does get used within our county, along with San Jose Water Company and their use as well. And what you can see circled at the very bottom of this chart is 21%. That is really phenomenal. We're still maintaining a 21% reduction in use from our community. This really speaks to everybody within our community staying engaged, staying active and educated about the importance of day-to-day conservation. Not just conservation because of a drought, but it's important to keep that mentality as you move throughout the years. So here's a kind of an interesting graph, and I'll just explain it generically. The blue, we'll focus on that first. That essentially is the rainfall. You can see it peaks and it valleys throughout the state of California. What does that tell us? Well, those peaks, of course, are those wetter times of year where we have a lot of precipitation, and then it goes down into the valleys, it dips down. And if you see the trend, we have almost 3 peaks there, and we have valleys. What's important to note is that this specifically means when we have those high rain events, we're doing everything we can to capture and retain that water and utilize it well. But then when we have those valleys, that's the time when we're really calling upon our community, working together in times of drought. So those are those drought periods. What you can also see is it's cyclic. But the next most important part of this chart is the orange line. The orange line indicates a trend upward of temperatures. And it's very important to note. That trend upward in temperatures tells us that our weather patterns are changing. The temperature is going up over a 12-year period. That's an indicator, of course, of climate change. And so we have to prepare for those and work closely with you to make sure that we have the water that's needed for everything from our day-to-day uses, and also to make sure that we thrive as an overall economy and that our county stays functioning. So we need to prepare for this, we need to monitor it, and we need to make sure that it's integrated in all of our practices day in, day out. So going back to that call, so back in June of 2017, the board did extend the call for that 20% reductions. They removed the mandatory because we were coming out of the drought, but they acknowledged that conservation is a way of life. And so those retailers, the municipalities, and our communities alike, they responded. We essentially recommended that let's keep those water-based restrictions, let's keep those in place. Let's not remove those. We're asking you cities and retailers, please include in your ordinances things like let's not continue to wash down the surfaces unnecessarily with water. Let's find other ways that we can essentially keep our streets and everything looking clean, but at the same time try to preserve that water for what we really need it for. And that's essentially to make sure that we can continue once again to thrive both as a community and be able to use that water in the most efficient way possible. So what did the state say during this time? Well, during the last drought, it was very interesting. Normally, droughts were handled at a local level, meaning cities and counties and special districts like us would respond to the drought through their own calls, through their own water conservation shortage contingency planning efforts. But the state last time decided to take an overarching approach. They saw a dire situation across the state that there wasn't enough water for all the communities. And they said, we're going to put an executive order in place and we're going to ask you to do more, all the communities consistently. So initially when they said, let's go ahead and do an executive order, they started to measure it by monthly and annual percent reductions. And we as the water community and water agencies went to the state and said, hey, we understand you want to trend this, but we also think there are better ways to look at how you would conserve water, because every community is different, how they utilize the water and what they use it for. So a percent trend doesn't always really tell you what you need to know in terms of, are you really as a community stepping up and doing water conservation well? So instead, they moved towards water use efficiency and budgeting targets, which were more specific to the types of uses within that jurisdiction, within that region, could really specify exactly, are we really employing water use efficiency technology? Are we really making advancements? Or are we just simply looking at a previous year and saying we've reduced by this percent? So we really wanted to transition into the behavioral realm, into the technology realm. So this was a huge shift and really a great kind of way for us to work with the state to get them to understand how is water used day to day on the ground with our users, with the community, and how do we make the most impact as it relates to water conservation. Climate change impacts. So this is a great pictorial. It depicts just a few things that happen as it relates to climate change. And you can see there's actually quite a few. So we'll start with the left. We know changing rain and snow patterns are going to be completely different based on those temperatures. Remember the temperature graph, we saw that it was going up. That tells us those increased temperatures means that snow located on the right-hand side, there'll be less snow and ice because it won't be produced as much because it's not as cold. But essentially what will happen is you'll see that snow melt sooner. You'll see that come out of the snowpack sooner, which means then you're going to have water that's coming into, the various watersheds and down and out into the bay sooner. So we're also going to see warmer water coming down because it's now coming down a different time of year. The oceans will be impacted. We also have higher temperatures that really are going to be happening because of those cyclic droughts. They're going to be happening more frequently, and we're going to see the temperature change. Therefore, it's going to be warmer. A lot of which is contributed due to greenhouse gases. So we know industrialism and just our existence as human beings is creating these higher temperatures and therefore impacting all of these things, including changes in animal migration and also life cycles. And then of course, one of the probably most impacting points of climate change is sea level rise. Sea level rise is serious, and it's really a trend that we are working very hard to better understand. And that is so important because sea level rise will in fact impact everything from the shorelines all the way into the watersheds and up into the delta. And essentially, we need to plan for that. We need to be ready to respond to that and work with our communities to better address the sea level rise, to help reduce it, but then also to help manage it as we move into the future. So here's just a summary once again of some of the things noted in the previous slide. So acceleration and warming across the entire state is anticipated. We would see intense and frequent heat waves, so they'll be hotter, droughts. We'll also see greater riverine flows because remember that snow is melting off the Sierras and it's coming down into the waterways more quickly. We'll also see intense and frequent droughts. So we do know more droughts and longer droughts are anticipated. We also see that accelerating sea level rise, extreme and severe storms, back-to-back storms that'll indicate, atmospheric rivers will come through even our communities. We'll see that intensity of storms throughout the winter time. So very different type of wet winters we'll experience. And then of course we're going to have less of a snowpack. So that storage that normally we would enjoy and have a snowpack sitting there for a while will shrink. It'll be gone sooner, which then means it's not available for later in the year when we need it. And then of course we have impact both to the environment and even impacts associated with wildfire as well. So it's real, it is a huge concern, not just impacting our state, but it also translates down into our community, into this county. And it's very important that we take proactive steps to address this and do our part. So we are. Our board has been very progressive. Your representatives of the community have really stepped up and really made climate change an impactful and important aspect of who we are and what we represent as an agency. So we have the Climate Change Action Plan. What does this do? It's a comprehensive framework where we look at what does climate change mean for our region and what can we do just as a water agency, a water district, what can we do to help with climate change? The first thing we want to do is we want to increase that resiliency and that adaptability. Remember, all these impacts happening throughout the state impact the water supply coming here. So we want to do anything and everything we can to help ensure that we have the water available that we enjoy today into the future, despite the fact we have climate change that will reduce the amount of water available. We also want to be able to adapt, so we want to think about other ways that we can do our projects within our county. We want to think about other ways that we can store water, other ways that we can procure water. So we really want to think outside of the box and be ready to maneuver around these challenges. We also want to look at decreasing that risk. What can we do in our part? Getting back to construction projects and any kind of project we're doing within our county. We want to see if there's any ways we can reduce any adverse impact to the environment, specifically related to climate change. And last but not least, greenhouse gases. As noted earlier, they noted we have several treatment plants, pumping stations. We move water around this county. We have operations. We do activities day in, day out. What can we do to reduce the impact of greenhouse gases associated with our operations? And so we do have a number of programs and things we do today, but we will continue to work on reducing our own footprint related to the impact to climate change within our county. Climate change, how does that impact water supply? So noted earlier, you see that the climate change across the state impacts the water supply coming into the county. So how are we planning for that? How are we going to be resilient? How are we going to adapt? We have what's called the Water Supply Master Plan. It is a document that we actually recently adopted with the board, and we worked on that plan for quite some time. We brought in experts from across the state to help us identify what are some of the risks associated with climate change and how will we determine our existing water supply can be preserved, but then what can we do in the future for alternate water supply and what does that look like? So this is a great picture where it shows a road. The bottom line is we today could say this is what our water supply portfolio looks like, these are the kind of water sources we have, and here are some of the things we want to do. But when you go down that road, when you go to look for the different water supplies and what they're going to be, you're going to come across roadblocks. You're going to come across challenges. And you can see one of the first ones there is climate change. We know there's going to be uncertainty. We know there are going to be challenges for us. We're going to have imported supplies that are going to be impacted by climate change. We're going to have water demands that are going to fluctuate. This community will have different trends as it relates to their individual water usage. We have to account for that. We also know that there might be some projects we're looking at today that might not realistically come to fruition, and there might be others that we want to advance more aggressively. An example of that is recycled water, taking wastewater and purposing that eventually into maybe our groundwater aquifers and into drinking water sources. We want to be able to be as independent and resilient as possible over time. We still have those diversification, which is important to bring some of those waters in from the Sierras, but we know those are threatened and we have to work aggressively to both secure those and do additional water supply as well. And so since the last summit, we've had a lot of great work that's been done both by the committee, by the staff, and our community. We've acknowledged that one of the most important components of adequately using this water supply in a landscape setting is through programmatic approaches. So we've had landscape rebate programs, but we've taken some pretty aggressive stances and saying, you know what, the funding that's there today, we need to up that funding. We need to really invest in the programs that are truly making good use of the public's money and putting it into programs and things that will reduce the water use and have the water be used in the most efficient way possible. So how can we utilize the landscape setting? How can we utilize our flora and fauna in a way that actually produces and creates not only a beautiful environment, but also helps us achieve some of the things related to climate change, helps reduce greenhouse gases, helps us use native plants as well. So that overarching goal is while it's just a program to do a rebate, is extremely impactful to the bigger picture surrounding climate change and making sure we're using that water most effectively. We also have water-wise videos that we've been employing and putting out there, really just trying to educate and reach additional people with your help. We've been doing that. And then we've also been looking, of course, at the Water Lawn Conservation Project. We have more coming. And we've also been working on the gray water program. And it's been kind of an interesting program as it started with the state saying, hey, let's do some gray water on site. So we've been working very closely with the municipalities, understanding their programs, and then we're providing rebates and programmatic information to the community so that they can do conversions. But we're not just doing gray water programs. We're trying to look at how do we reach people that maybe can't afford it, or those that might not have the ability to do it themselves on their own. So we've been working closely with low-income, senior, disabled, and VAs alike. And additionally, we have, coming into this year, more to come, we've also been working with Bayfall in order to reach other folks within our community, which includes folks that might be of a different language-speaking background. So we've been working closely with community as it relates to getting to those that speak Spanish with Baycall. We have additional partnering we've been doing with Bay Area Water Conservation, Supply and Conservation Agency, and then also we look to do more into the Bay Area throughout the year. And then of course we've been partnering quite heavily with South Bay Green Gardens as well, and we'll continue that partnership. So we look forward to what comes in this coming year as it relates to what we can do to work with the community and continue to advance landscaping efforts that meet all of these very important goals related to reducing climate, impacts associated with climate change, to using water efficiency. This is very important to us, and we really look forward to those continued partnerships with both you and others, and along with our community as we move forward. So with that, I stand ready for any questions that you might have. And if I cannot answer a question, we have amazing staff that's sitting around the room that can answer those questions as well.
In the pink, sorry, go ahead.
You made a comment a little bit about how ocean level rise will affect the creeks and streams that flow into the bay. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Yes, so we anticipate, and one of the things we look at, because we're also our groundwater agency, is we want to see the trends of that water coming into our creeks. And one of the main reasons why is that water coming into the creek and those tidal influences, we anticipate may change. And the creeks not only are a great place for, our habitat and for flora and fauna alike, but it's also a place where we do in-creek or in-stream recharge. And we provide water actually naturally precipitates and seeps into those areas as well. And so that infiltration into our groundwater basins impacts the amount of water availability. So there's actually a nexus between how that water moves into our creek systems and then into our groundwater basins. So there's literally an overall approach to how we look at the water and where it's going and how it comes into water use and supply. I hope that helps in terms of explaining.
And we've got time for one more question in the pink. Go ahead.
I actually have a couple questions. If you could address the water treatment system in San Jose is dumping the water into the bay that has been 99% treated. Why isn't more of that being reclaimed or put into groundwater discharge? That's the first thing. And I got that from a trip 4 years ago there. The second question I have is I've heard from various speakers that 20% of the power generated in California goes toward moving water. And what specifically are you doing to address the energy needs that we can become more green and moving that water, the energy requirement for that?
Absolutely, great question. So the first question has to deal with there are regional wastewater facilities. So whenever we flush our toilets, everything goes down the drain and into these regional wastewater facilities. There's one in San Jose, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, and in South County as well. So we as Valley Water, we're a water agency. So we're not a wastewater agency, but we're a water agency. So what we are actually doing today is we're actually working very closely with them on an extensive planning effort related to recycled water. And so the idea is to pair up with the wastewater agencies, better understand that water that is going to the bay, the water that could be repurposed and could be brought back into piping systems and be utilized within this county. So that planning effort looks to identify opportunities for us to advance those efforts with those projects in that water. We do have a purified water facility. I encourage everyone to go and tour this facility. It's remarkable in that it brings innovation and it really does take the water from that wastewater facility and it looks at, it's basically a huge, massive pilot plant, but it also blends purified water that's purified enough to drink into current recycled water uses for purple pipe, dual plumb, and irrigation today. The thought, though, is for us to expand those efforts. So take that plant or other plants across the county and eventually build and create, with technology, the ability to maximize that wastewater and put it into drinking water sources or into the groundwater basin. So then we have a more sustainable water available for us long term. So that is a huge effort. We're currently at 5% recycled water, and we're looking to increase that at least to 10%, maybe more into the future. So that's the recycled water piece. The second question you had is actually an excellent question. So because those imported water sources are not directly managed by us, they're managed by the state and the federal government, they actually push that water. And what the high energy use is related to when it comes to moving water is pumping. So elevation differences and getting water over hills and mountains and things, it needs to be pushed, and it needs to be pushed through mechanical means, which is pumping. So typically pumping is a huge contributor factor to the amount of energy used to move water. And so that brings it into our county. And so those energy uses we don't directly control, but we do work closely with those agencies to push our perspective of reducing the pumping and or looking to use green energy to do that. And so because we have our own treatment plants and other pumping we do in county, we actually purchase, and we work very closely with Central Valley, who is creating solar farms. And so we are actually purchasing green power from the solar farms throughout the Central Valley. So we have a huge investment portfolio surrounding procuring green power, so then we can offset our carbon footprint for those treatment plants and the pumping of moving water around the county. But we haven't stopped there, and actually, ironically, our board is wanting us to do more, and to look more at beyond how you can purchase green power, what else can we be doing? We do have some in-county solar as well, but we want to make sure we look at everything. We want to, every stone unturned. Can we change our operations? Is there something else we can be doing outside of just buying green power? And we also have a really great paper we published a few years back that kind of looked to the team, but it's called watts to water. And so what it does is it actually calculates and looks at even water conservation can be equated to water savings. And so I think that's a very important story. If our community is saving 20%, that means we have 20% of water that would have been moved around this county that's not being moved around. Therefore, there's an energy savings there. There's less of a greenhouse gas impact, and there's less of an adverse impact to the environment. So we like to look at that as well. So we really want to let the community know even your work translates to energy savings. It's very important. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Hawk.
Okay.